Hello, this is Alex Dyer, Canon Ordinary for the Episcopal Church in Colorado, back with another Canon Conversation. And I am very excited about today's guest, Ian Markham, who is the Dean of Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria, Virginia, my old stomping grounds. And here today we're talking about ethics, especially in the age of pandemics. Dean Markham, welcome.
It's lovely to be with you, Canon Dyer. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So happy to talk to you today about ethics to the good people of the Episcopal Church of Colorado. So a lot of ethical issues that we're exploring as a result of the pandemic here today. I was wondering if you could give necessarily like a brief overview of ethics and leadership and how you think it relates to today's questions that we're dealing with.
Delighted to do so. I mean, one of the most important things I think to say is that an obligation of discipleship is to be morally serious. So what do I mean by a morally serious person? I mean a person who is self-consciously reflective about the challenge of living and seeking to do so in a way that authentic values the golden rule. In other words, we resist the temptation to just think constantly about ourselves. We refocus our human lives on those around us, and we pay particular attention to those on the margins. And, you know, if you just look at the witness of Scripture, this is probably one of the primary themes. That we as people who are faithful to a God of love have an obligation to constantly think about those that others are overlooking. And that is a deep act of Christian faithfulness that's essential for every Christian to observe.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially on the fact of the pandemic does seem to have created a lot of self-protection. We're worried about ourselves a lot more too. I think it's brought up a lot of issues in people. I think it's, despite the fact it's a global pandemic, it's brought up a lot of, I think, nationalism in ourselves too, and protecting our own country and looking out for ourselves. So what's the church's witness in that? How are we faithful followers of Jesus? What should we be doing about this?
You know, what's interesting is one of the truths about living in life is that every single time there's a disaster, some human lives have the resources to cope and other human lives are completely and utterly devastated. And this is true of the pandemic as it was of the New Orleans flood, Katrina, as it was of other disasters. And that's the first key insight, is that all of us have an obligation to just reflect on how our society is structured so that, you know, the resources are sufficiently available for every community to have some sort of opportunity to survive and cope. And of course, this is a devastation that particularly has devastated minority communities. So one of the first obligations is simply to know that, observe it, and say it. You know, that's part of our witness in this moment in time. And then you need to sort of sit back and sort of think about the sort of ways in which an individual, institution, or parish could make a difference. The chapel at Virginia Theological Seminary is a vaccination clinic. It's a vaccination clinic for neighborhood health that specializes in targeting those which are uninsured, those that are minority communities, those that are vulnerable to potential death if they get COVID. And, you know, we've had to sacrifice our worship space. But, you know, while the spiritual lives can't be fed as effectively, the physical life is now the priority. And that's part of our witness, that we are making sure that we are in a very tangible way making available the vaccine to communities that otherwise might not get it. So I do think that that's part of our witness at this time. I also think, actually, that if a clergy person is given the possibility of having the vaccine, they probably should. Because the other thing going on here is for every person eager to have the vaccine, there are others who are very nervous about it. And so therefore part of our witness is, you know, this vaccine is safe, you should get it, I'm getting it, I'll make sure my loved ones get it because it is safe and we want others to get it. So you've got to constantly balance your obligations and witness at this time. And it isn't simply one of self-denial, actually. I think this is also a moment when, you know, you love your neighbor as yourself. And part of loving yourself in this moment is actually to model a willingness to get the vaccine.
Yeah, and I like that kind of going back and forth, because I've struggled with myself on, you know, clergy have been given, I would say, a special privilege in order to get it a little bit earlier than everyone else. And part of me has wrestled with the fact of, do I do that, knowing some people have not getting it? Yeah. And I think the complication behind that is that it's not quite as simple as there's a line and I'm shoving somebody out of the way type of thing too, that if I get it, then, you know, if I don't get it, then somebody more vulnerable will get it. I think that's the complicating thing.
Right, but you've got to remember, you know, once you've got it, then you can have more pastoral access, you can be more present, you could potentially be at the bedside of somebody suffering. I mean, one thing I really disapprove of are those who get the vaccine and then carry on nervously navigating the world. So in other words, I think if you're going to get the vaccine, then start functioning as a person of presence. You know, do your bit to go to the hospital, to talk to doctors and nurses, to have access to people who might need pastoral care and support. Don't simultaneously get the vaccine and then basically carry on remote working and doing everything at a distance, because I think that is having your cake and eating it. That's where you are insisting I'm vaccinated and simultaneously I still don't want to have any proximity to people. So I think if clergy are a priority, and that's not true in Virginia. In Virginia, higher education is. So I've had my first dose. But in Colorado, clergy are. There's a reason for that, though. The policy decision is, we need you. We need your presence and proximity. So therefore, I think you have an obligation to do work. Notice the crucial words work, not parties. This doesn't mean, oh good, I've got the vaccine, now I can just go out to a bar, go out to the restaurant, go out to the resort, and this is great. No, I've been made a priority sector by the secular authorities in Colorado because they anticipate that I have work to do. Therefore, I must find ways of doing that work. And where I would agree that perhaps you decline it is if you are the personality type that says, even if I've got the vaccine, I still wouldn't want to do anything. I mean, one weird thing about all this is one challenge I think every leader has had is you've got some at one end of the spectrum who think it's a hoax, and you've got some at the other end of the spectrum who think it's a Black Death. And part of what we've got to, I think, witness to is an informed, science-based witness to what this is and how best we should navigate it. So that's actually one of the reasons why I'm in favor of clergy getting the vaccine, because that pushes back on those, and then having got the vaccine working, because that pushes back on both those poles, which actually is a part of our witness in this time.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree. Kind of getting back and working, you know, safely. I think we're always, you know, I think there's a misconception sometimes that the vaccine means that, you're free, you can go do everything you want, and da, da, da. So just to be clear on that, and I know you know that too, but I feel like I have to say that, that yes, I think, you can increase your risk tolerance and go out and do some stuff. And, I never thought about it from that point. They are, we are getting vaccinated for a reason.
Right, exactly. No, you're right. In terms of, so I just revised the guidelines for the community here and said that even if you have been vaccinated, you still need to wear a mask and physically distance, because, as you know, the science says you can still be a carrier and you could still get mild forms of it and infect others who are potentially at risk and haven't had the privilege of being vaccinated. So the situation at the seminary is all employees are eligible for the vaccination, but none of the students are. So we've still got to navigate with some care what it means to be working in a community where there's a high percentage of people who've not had the privilege of having the vaccine. But my point is that, there are a whole host of aspects of the school that require presence, like facilities and maintenance and housekeeping and the mail centre and the butterfly house, our childcare centre. So, these departments need to work. And even if you're not one of those departments, if you've been vaccinated, you can come to an office, and you should do so, and you should be available to anybody who would like to talk to you, who might have been vaccinated or wants a physically distanced conversation, because that's the reason why you're offered the vaccine. So in other words, what I'm trying to argue is understand the reason for the policy, live into the spirit of that policy, and the primary service clergy can give is a pastoral one, especially with those who either have COVID. Once you're vaccinated, you should be willing to make visits to those who need your support.
And I suspect you would argue too, there's probably, through our previous conversation, there's an obligation to continue to fight for those in the margins who don't have it as well. So.
Very much, and to find ways of getting it to them and supporting those who can. I mean, so every parish church, I think, in the country now should be ringing up the local authorities, the health authorities, and saying, look, I want you to know you can use my parish hall. I want you to know you can use the church. I want you to know, as far as I'm concerned, you could put the vaccine vials on the altar. I am available to provide a space if it would work for you. Because a lot of parishes have great parking, and a lot of the most imaginative services for the marginalized communities are very small operations. So they actually, so in our case, they're here every Tuesday and Friday, and that's all they need. But they do need a space to do it in. So, they're not one of these 24/7 take over a warehouse or a parking lot. No, this is a very boutique service targeting groups that find it difficult to get the vaccine. So I think there's a lot of opportunity actually in this moment for witness, and I do encourage everybody just to be bold. Obviously, check with your bishop that it's okay to make the space available, but or
be bold. To the ordinary,
or to Canon to the ordinary. Yep, for sure. Just so to be in lockstep. But yeah, let people know that the church is ready to serve in these times, and we witness to hope rather than fear. We witness to healing rather than sickness. We witness to inclusion rather than exclusion.
So part of the issues that people have been doing ever since the beginning of this pandemic is worship, because we're good Episcopalians. We love communal worship, and we've been struggling with that. So I was wondering if you could tell me, I mean, I know every situation is specific, as far as, ventilation and, all this other kind of stuff too. So not necessarily specifics, but if you were a leader in a parish church, right? what would be going in your mind? How would you be making these decisions? What would be, your kind of ethical foundation and framework for making the decision whether to do in person or virtual, and how will you use the resources?
Okay, so a couple of guidelines, which I think are now pretty standard across the Episcopal Church. The first is that safety matters. Primarily congregational singing is the villain. And to tell you the truth, it's, for me, something I'm desperately missing is congregational singing. So that's crucial, that they're safe, and therefore you're unlikely to be singing congregational hymns. The second factor is be imaginative, because the people of God need to be fed. And one issue I think the country faces is that mental illness, loneliness, weight gain, the accompanying stress of close proximity with the spouse and with potential tensions that might create, children homeschooling. Church is a really important vehicle where people place their anxieties in an eternal context, and in so doing, they are reminded afresh that the creator of the universe is walking this journey with them, and that is a ministry that needs to be heard. I think whatever you do, do it really well. So if you record the service, make sure it's a good recording. If you Zoom the service, make sure the technology works. Whatever you do, put as much effort and thought into it. Create face-to-face opportunities for those who feel comfortable heading them. I think that is a good policy. I'm doing a field Eucharist today. So at 12 noon, I'll be standing in the chapel garden, and we'll have 25 in that space. And if there are 26 people there, that one person will stand outside until the end of the 20-minute Eucharist, and then I'll do it all over again for that one person, or 10 or 15 or whatever it is. But yeah, do create opportunities, especially if you're vaccinated, for face-to-face worship if the local government guidelines and diocesan guidelines permit. I think more importantly, actually, in all this, is really think about post-pandemic. Now, to tell you the truth, there won't be a post-pandemic, because I think all the guidance now is that we're looking at something that will linger like the annual flu and be more fatal, probably. The annual flu takes 30,000 human souls every year, and this will probably be part of it, and there'll be an annual vaccination, and therefore we're going to be with this variant for some time. But there will be more face-to-face opportunities. Congregations will reopen. So I think most strong congregations will end up offering a hybrid. In other words, the rector should anticipate, continue to record things for people who stay at home, and providing incentives for people who want to be present. Because, and you should be constantly analyzing your own flock. In other words, what I think people should be doing is they should be sort of doing surveys, and they ought to be getting responses saying, okay, this is my experience of the remote service. I quite like doing it in my pajamas. I always have a cup of coffee with me. No, I don't stand and sit for the various parts of the liturgy, or whatever. Collect that data. And make sure that they continue to do that. And this is one of my desperate pleas, is that the Episcopal Church starts counting people who participate in the worship in these ways. Because if we don't start counting them, we're going to have parochial reports in 2 years' time that talks about a third of the Episcopal Church has disappeared. And a lot of these hybrid congregations, they haven't disappeared at all. They've just created a new pattern of faithfulness, and they want to carry on doing it. However, it is in our interest to encourage presence. So then the rector needs to be thinking, okay, what sort of opportunities can presence create? And, the traditional one's food, but it might be Bible study, it might be childcare, it might be a walking tour of the neighborhood. It might be some imaginative program. It might be, but think of church in new and different ways post-pandemic. And I think every congregation needs a group, subsection of the vestry, but intergenerational, who are really thinking about what design of church is post-pandemic and how does it look and what's it like and what's going on. Because I think that that is almost as important a question now as the questions, when do I start doing face-to-face again? What does a Zoom service look like? Which we've now been living with for a good almost a year.
Well, thank you, Dean Markham. Best wishes to everything. I know that's a little screen background, but spring is coming on its way to Virginia Seminary and that beautiful campus that you have. Thank you for all the work you're doing on behalf of the church. The vaccination clinic sounds amazing for you using your space and for the leadership that Virginia Seminary has provided during this time, not just you, but the many professors and everything. We've had Professor Farwell on here, as well as Patricia Lyons and whatnot too, and you all are really stepping up during this time. So thank you all for your leadership. We appreciate it.
And let me just say, I think this is an inspired idea that you are doing. I hope others are imitating what these Canon Conversations. And this is exactly the sort of leadership the church needs at these times. Opportunities for people to hear and discuss and to talk and to imaginatively respond to the challenges that we face. So thank you for everything you're doing in your ministry, and may God continue to bless you.
Thank you. Take care.